Hello again, and welcome to the Dorothy L. Sayers podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Scholl, and today we are continuing our conversation with Dr. Janice Brown, author of 7 Deadly Sins in the work of Dorothy L. Sayers. Please join us as we discuss Sayers' view on sloth, envy, and pride, and also as we learn about Dr. Brown's more recent book, The Lion in the Wasteland, Fearsome Redemption in the work of C.S. Lewis, Dorothy L. Sayers, and T.S. Eliot. One more note on the novels. Murder Must Advertise is the one I tend to recommend for people who, if they're just trying to get Whose Body or Murder Must Advertise are good, I think, entries into Sayers, into whimsy. But one of the things I really appreciate about your book is that it helped me appreciate all of the supporting actors. Yes. And in Murder Must Advertise, like, you have this line where you say that resentment towards one's employers or towards people in authority in general is a form of envy. Yes. And I'm used to Sayers' treatment of sloth. I've kind of wrestled with her views on lust and pride, but her treatment of envy, especially as expressed in that novel, it was a good revelation for me.
Right. I always found that I think Sayers said this. I remember coming up in her discussion of envy in writing on Dante, that one of the ways of recognizing envy is to think of the scripture that we are meant to weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. Well, the envious person is glad when something bad happens to someone that they envy. They rejoice when someone else is weeping, and they weep when someone else is rejoicing, because they do not wish others well. A very helpful way of figuring out what exactly envy is and how prevalent it is in our own hearts. There are certain people that if something bad happens to them, we don't necessarily say it out loud, but inside we might say, oh, proper thing, they deserve that. Or right. I'm kind of glad that happened, rather than having compassion. Whereas the merciful person, the opposite virtue, as Dante sets it up, the opposite virtue to envy is mercy. The merciful person weeps with those that weep and rejoices with those that rejoice.
And they're both outward facing. One's an outward facing vice and one's an outward facing virtue. So isolationism isn't a solution for either one, but this is how do you react to the external, to other people. It's kind of a neighborly vice, anti-neighborly vice or virtue. Yes. Okay, so it sounds like this is a good time to either bridge into her plays, or if you want to talk about On the Other 6 Deadly Sins, which kind of is also a great introduction to her work on sins.
Well, it's hard to summarize a work like the other six deadly sins.
Yeah, it is.
She wrote so beautifully summarizing what they are and showing, that materialism and consumerism are parts of those sins of covetousness and gluttony. Gluttony is not just necessarily gluttony for food, but consumerism, needing more and more goods, more and more things all the time. The need to shop, the need to buy things. It's a kind of gluttony.
Her title is indicative of kind of where she is, as far as where her assessment of culture, right? At her time.
Yes.
So can you say something about the title?
Well, she felt that the church was always emphasizing the sin of lust and never making any reference to the other deadly sins. And so she does say a few things of definition of lust in that essay, but she does not have should be returned to by its name rather than just calling it by the generic term immorality. And she says that the condemnation of lust must be based on sacramental grounds. In other words, you can't expect a person who has no sense of the sacredness of life to have the same view of lust that Scripture would have and Christians should have. But anyway, to go on to what she says about some of the other things, sloth is a sin that people hardly ever think about or understand, but in one of the medieval definitions of it, it was refusal of joy. She talks about it as a major spiritual problem that has little to do with laziness in the usual sense of the word, but it's a desperate condition of the heart. and I'm quoting from her now here, in the world it calls itself tolerance, but in hell it is called despair. It is a sin which believes nothing, cares for nothing, seeks to know nothing, interferes in nothing, enjoys nothing, loves nothing, hates nothing, finds purpose in nothing. And so it's just a failure to care about anything. And it occurs to me, and I used to say this to my students, it kind of jolted them a little bit, that the tendency to say whatever in a conversation, to say is kind of like a gesture of sloth.
Like whatever.
It doesn't, nothing really matters. If someone was suggesting a plan to you, a way of looking at something, and you said, whatever, you're saying it doesn't matter. I don't really care about your plans. I don't think things matter. And so it is a kind of sloth, a kind of failure of zeal, failing to care about and love the things that deserve our concern and our love. And
so that would be a cold sin, right?
Yes, yeah, it is a cold-hearted sin, and she talks about it in a context, in the context of this essay, as one of the cold-hearted sins. And of course, she talks about the other's pride and so on. But that essay is one of her masterpieces, definitely, and I think it's available in several collections. I'm not sure if it's available online or not, but it's certainly available in several of the collections of her essays.
Yeah, one of the most accessible, I think, now in print editions of her essays is Letters to a Diminished Church. And I think I've recommended to our readers before. I don't remember when it was published, but it's definitely in there. And it's got Why Work and some other good essays in there as well. Yeah, so that would be, as you say, it's kind of hard to summarize. So I would recommend to our readers to just go read it.
Yeah,
it's always better to read her.
I have a book that I wanted to recommend to you, Lindsay.
Sure.
I was looking at my bookshelf and I realized that you may not know about this one or have it, because it was published by the Dorothy Sayers Society about 15 years ago or more. It's called The Christ of the Creeds and Other Broadcast Messages to the British People During World War II. Have you heard of that or seen it?
You know, actually, I'm looking at my bookshelf now, and I have it. I just haven't read it. Like, I think I've requested it for Christmas a couple years ago, but I just got busy and forgot I had it.
Well, it's not well known, but all the things in it are not published anywhere else. There were some broadcast messages that she did on some sections of the creed that were assigned to her, and some of the people other people who wrote on other passages in the creeds, their talks were so lacking in content or significance that nobody ever bothered to republish them or reproduce them. But there's also some letters in there that are not included in the collected letters. There's some letters that, like one of them is called "The Gospel is a Thing of Terror." Another one is called "The Touchstone of History." And these are really striking letters, and they weren't included in the collection that that Barbara Reynolds edited, probably because they were so deeply religious, and you have to have a special sort of focus on, or Barbara Reynolds thought a person would have to have a special focus on Sayers' religious thought in order to enjoy them, but they're wonderful letters.
Well, I'll revisit that, definitely.
Yeah, it's really worth looking at. Yes.
So that was published by the Dorothy Sayers Society. I didn't
and I met Suzanne Bray, who wrote it. She's quite a great researcher. I met her at Sayers conferences before.
Oh, okay.
So that was published in 2008. It looks like.
Yeah, we could have a whole nother discussion, I think, about like Sayers, what's available for Sayers and what's not available for Sayers. Because I think that there's some work on her. She has some commentary on film. I don't know about essays, but letters where she talks about film that aren't mentioned in the letters in the Reynolds editions of the letters.
Was that right? I haven't seen those. No, I haven't.
I think I got that idea from Crystal Downing at the Wade Center, and I need to track it down before I say much more serious about it before I commit myself. But I think there's not much on film in the letters, and she was interested in some elements of film. So let's I think we probably got a few more minutes here. on this particular podcast, although hopefully maybe we can talk later, about the her works on the seven deadly sins in the plays or other works kind of later post novels. Is there one that you would say to the readers, like, look, if you want to deal with Sayers' ideas on sin, this is a good one to read?
Probably The Zeal of Thy House, because it's such a clear picture of hubris, the sin of pride, and God's mercy and the redemptive process. And it's based on a historical character, a real incident in history. The architect that was building the main nave of Canterbury did have an accident and was maimed. And so Sayers decided to tell his story as if she knew the character, which obviously you can't know a character from the 12th century. But a comment made about him in the records of the monastic community suggested that he may have been a person of great pride. And so she took that as a clue to a character that she could build. And so it's a very impressive play. It was the first of the plays that she wrote for the Canterbury Festival.
She did such a good job at bringing history to life and making it have a point, and a history that people may not know. Definitely in America, we had no clue about William of Sins and the church and all of that.
Yes.
So it's like educational from that perspective, and also from the nature of pride. And he's got some great speeches in there that you point out in your book about how arrogant he kind of becomes over time.
Yes.
Or maybe he starts out arrogant. I don't really remember. We could go a little bit further on the seven deadly sins, or we can switch gears and talk a little bit about your book, The Lion of the Wasteland, because I would like readers to hear about that briefly as well.
Yes, I could speak about that. It's certainly fresher in my mind. I had to review myself since it was published in 1998, the one on Sayers and the Seven Deadly Sins. But 20 years later, in 2018, I brought out my other large research book, and that is The Lion in the Wasteland, a fearsome redemption in the work of C.S. Lewis, Dorothy L. Sayers, and T.S. Eliot. And in it, I compared the thought and was not even so much a contrast as just a comparison, as showing the similarities of thought of these three writers. First of all, I'd spent some time talking about the actual contact they had with each other and the nature of the relationship, and the fact that Lewis and Eliot were thought to have had bad feeling between them. And there was some truth in that, but not to the extent that people have assumed, and certainly not in the latter part of their lives. And then Sayers and Lewis were great pen friends, more than spending much time together. But then I chose to write on 8 different topics. So their view of Christ, their depiction of conversion, their presentation of angelic forces, angels in their work. And that's my longest chapter. All 3 of them do so much with angels, surprisingly.
Oh, fascinating.
And then the view of suffering. That chapter is called Fiery Trials, World War II, and Redemptive Suffering. And then the next chapter is called The Journey to Joy, Life as a Pilgrimage to Heaven. And then the last chapter, Ask for the Old Paths, Redeeming the Time. That's their view of modernity and their sense that there's so much been lost by modernization and the changes that the 20th century brought in, and that so many of the values of earlier days have been lost. And their view of time, particularly in that last chapter. So again, that was a work that was very, very interesting and rewarding for me, but because I was teaching full time while I was working on it, I did have a sabbatical and got a good start on it, but then I finished it after my retirement from teaching at Grove City College.
Okay. And so you chose, so it seems like in this era, like you get Lewis, Sayers, and Eliot. There's also Williams or others or Tolkien to choose from, but you chose those 3. You excluded others by choosing those 3. Was there a reason for that, or just like time? You're just like, these guys have a lot to say about these particular topics. Well, we're going to go with these guys.
Well, Tolkien would not have fitted in because he's writing totally fiction and he's not directly addressing topics. his treatment of things like, even how could you talk about Tolkien's treatment of Christ, his treatment of conversion.
You couldn't even do it allegorically well.
But you don't have direct treatment of Christian topics in Tolkien. And in Williams, not that much either. Williams is so difficult. I feel like he only can really be studied with a lot of help from other writers who knew him and has commentaries on him. And in actual fact, Williams was mentioned in a sentence that I quote from a man who wrote a history of 20th century Christianity, and he spoke of 4 writers who were key to the revival of Christian thought in British culture and literature, and what he calls a kind of golden age of Christianity in the middle of the 20th century. And he did mention Williams along in the same breath with Sayers, Lewis, and Eliot.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I thought, I could try to include Williams, but I don't think I would live long enough to finish the book.
You got to have your limits.
My own mortality stared me in the face. Yeah. I thought, I don't think I could include Williams, but I do mention Williams.
He is so, as I think, I don't remember who said it, but it may have been Lewis, but maybe I'm making it up. Is that the half of Williams that I understand is brilliant, but I don't understand the other half, because it's just so something. But I do have a question about the book itself. I haven't read it yet, but I know Lewis decently well. I know Sayers pretty well. Eliot I don't know him as well, really, at all. So I've read the 4 quartets once, and that's about it. So how would you, if somebody wanted to read that book, should I do some pre-reading before I enjoy it, or is it?
No, I don't assume that anybody has read any of the writers ahead of time. I think I'm able to give the context of a quotation, but I'm thinking that anybody who picks up the book is going to be interested in and familiar with at least one of them already, but it's not necessary. And certainly the least familiarity will probably be for Eliot, because most people don't understand his Christianity, because there's been a concerted effort by Eliot scholars to hide Eliot's Christianity. The Eliot Society, which has a conference in St. Louis, Missouri every year, doesn't accept papers that directly speak of his Christianity. In my experience, at least, that seemed to be what I observed. And they have a Unitarian service as part of the conference, because the people who sponsor it, there's a couple there, a wealthy couple who are Eliot fans. They are Unitarians, and Eliot called Unitarians infidels.
Wow.
His parents, his family were, but he said other Christians should not regard Unitarians as Christians. They are basically just humanists. And so, but here you have the Eliot Society pretending that Eliot was a Unitarian. And so it's very discouraging to me that when I went to one conference and then realized that it was pointless to submit a paper that was overtly Christian. So I think they have been somewhat successful, I think, in creating an aura of failure to recognize Eliot's Christianity, an aura of secularism around him, and the strong Christian life that he lived and ideas that he had have just been hidden so much. But I really don't know how anyone can enjoy Four Quartets without being a Christian, truly.
Yeah. And also, I think that it's probably not helped by, although Cats is a fine musical, it's based off his poem, right? And yes.
But that's a very but that wasn't
not related.
His poetry. That was just something he did for fun.
You can see how Eliot would you'd want to cite Eliot, but and Andrew Lloyd Webber in the same sentence, and you're not people may not want to mess with his Christianity, although they should.
Yeah, but I think what people what people focus on is like the wasteland, which is pre-Christian poem.
Sure. Yeah.
And the sort of bizarreness of some of his less important dramas, again, from a very early period of his writing. But the power, I felt one of my motives in doing this book, as I did, was to encourage people who already know and love Lewis or Sayers to see how profoundly similar Eliot was, but in different ways. He had a different kind of creative genius, obviously, but just to see how his understanding of Christ and conversion and suffering and all that was so compatible with the Christian views of Sayers and Lewis. So I guess one of my other goals was to make Sayers more known, because I think she's the least visible of the three writers, and then to make Eliot more known as a Christian. So I guess I've been hoping that people who would pick up the book because they're interested in Lewis would learn about Sayers and about Eliot's Christianity from it.
Well, I think that's a brilliant strategy. I can't see how it wouldn't work. Like, if you pick it up and you want to read more about Lewis and you finish the book, you would inevitably come up with an appreciation of Sayers and Eliot as well. It's kind of how you would bridge into those authors if you weren't familiar with them.
Right.
So, and for our listeners, the Lion in the Wasteland is available easily on Amazon. If you're looking for a read on any of those authors, or learn about more of those authors, or about the time period of World War II and the Christian perspective. Well, I think that we could probably go into several other podcast episodes at this point, but why don't we go ahead and end it right now?
Yes.
And maybe we'll hear from you again in the future. That would be wonderful.
Thank you
for your time.
I've enjoyed doing this. Thank you for asking me.
Sure. My pleasure. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening in on this conversation. It's always a treat to talk with someone who is as well-read and articulate as Dr. Brown. If you have any questions or comments, please email me at dorothyelsayerspodcast@gmail.com. God bless you.